Hello, everyone. This is a special edition release engineering meeting. It is October 29th. This is a meeting that is recorded and available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you say, what you do. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct and just in general, be awesome people. So we've been doing a few code-based tours. The last few have been around image building and some of the release engineering process, and then we also recently did a staging of the I want to say the 1.17 alpha 3 release. So in that video, I went through some of the staging process. I'm going to post it in the chat for people who are here. And what I'd like to do this time is not go through the same stuff that we did last time, which was staging stuff. So this time we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's involved in doing the actual release, right? So our release is kind of broken up into 3 steps, right? It's the build, which we have running in CI, and that runs basically every hour or so, right? So the CI Kubernetes build job runs every hour or so, and that one is that's what lands artifacts in our CI buckets. We also have the staging process. The staging process essentially does a build and checks some permissions to ensure that artifacts land where they're supposed to, right? And then finally, the release process actually pulls the trigger on those staging builds, copies them from a staging bucket into the actual prod bucket, and then also releases the container images and updates version markers and so on and so forth. So scripts that may be leveraging markers that use something like dl.k8s.io. These jobs are responsible for updating some of those markers. So again, I'm posting the link for the first video on the staging process, and now we're going to kick off the release stuff. So actually, we're not going to kick off the release stuff. The release stuff is essentially all done today. What I didn't want to do is have another call where we were kind of like, okay, well, we've done the stage now, and we wait for about 40, 45, an hour long to see that done. What I wanted to do instead is, since the 1.17 beta.0 is kind of a special release, all of the beta zeros are special releases, because that's essentially when our staging process will cut a release branch, right? So today we cut the release 1.17 branch, and from there, to make that branch functional, we need to apply a few doodads. So I want to show you what some of those doodads are, because I think it's interesting, and I think it's mysterious. Is the best way to put it if you're not familiar with dealing with this stuff day to day. So I'm going to share my screen, and give me a second to do that. Just closing some sensitive windows. All right, and here we go. Right, so the first thing that you might do as a branch manager or as a release manager is go and view the handbook, right? Which is somewhere. Okay. Right. And let's just walk through this really quickly. So there's some prerequisites that you read over, and you finally get to the safety check, release management, some of the general bookkeeping. So general bookkeeping will tell you to open a cut a release issue on krelease. So let's go take a look at that issue. Right. So one of the first things that we do for this issue, let me just make sure this is in the right project, and in progress, and milestone 117. Right, so the first thing that we do is we screenshot master. We have a tool called test grid shot that's in the Kubernetes release repo. And if you were to look at, if you actually take a look at some of the comments here, it will tell you exactly what you should be doing at certain stages. Right, so add some things to the checklist if you want. Here's a template for how to snapshot these things. Essentially, we're just using that test grid shot tool, and I can show that to you really quickly. Right, so if I just, so from k-release, if I do test grid shot and then master, do a branch that I'm targeting. Oh, okay. So I can't show you that because I would expose my key. Okay, so we'll skip that. But what it ends up giving you is a pretty printout of the set of boards and how green they are or how not green they are, right? So this lists the failing boards, the failing jobs on the master blocking and master informing boards, right? So node kubelet master is one of them, and it also gives you a link to the test grid of that test grid page for that, right? And you can see that some of these are starting to go green, so yay. And then you've got the GCE cause master serial and GCE Windows master, right? And again, there are links to each of these boards if you want to check it out. The next thing that you kind of do is, so there's a log that we keep, and the log kind of looks like this, right? So it's basically capturing the steps that that you would follow. So this starts off as an empty table, and during the release process, you're going to do a mock stage, a mock release, a stage, and then the actual release, right? So all this is doing is capturing. Ooh, this is off a little. Let's fix that. Huh. Okay, all right, so that's. All right, so I have a scratch pad just so I can walk through these things as the day goes on and update this table, right? So that's fixed now. So basically we capture the command that we used, the link to the cloud build run, right? So if I click into that, I can view what's going on GCP, or someone else can for future reference, right? As well as the set of commands that it's running, a clone, compile release tools, doing a pre-build, a build only, build at head for the staging process. And then at the end of it, what it gives you, and let me just make that a little bigger, what it will give you is a command that you can use to release the staged build, right? So that's the command. Notice for the mock stage that it does not have the no mock flag. By default, a lot of our release tools will run in a mock mode, so you don't accidentally shoot yourself in the foot, right? So each of those runs take about 50 minutes. In the case of the beta 0, what's actually happening behind the scenes is we're doing 2 releases, right? We're cutting the beta 0, but we're also staging the 1.18 alpha 0, right? So every time we do this release process, it basically increments the counter, right? Where it figures out what the next release would be on master, right? So because we're now moving to, we're cutting a new branch and we're moving the essentially development process for 1.17 over to that branch. And that's what you'll see basically during the code freeze period, where the where submissions to that branch will require cherry picks, right? There's a time which is now between now and code freeze where we will essentially fast forward the 1.17 branch, the release 1.17 branch from master, and so while we're doing that, everyone is safe up until the point that code freeze hits and everything else becomes a cherry pick directly to release 1.17 if you're trying to get it in under the wire, right? So that's the extra 30 or so minutes that you see here. It's trying to do both of those releases simultaneously. Now the mock release, all of the actual release process, and you can see again, this is the command copied from here, right? And yeah, so each of the releases, whether it be a mock or otherwise, take about 20 minutes. So you can see like this stuff was done a little earlier today, and this was done more recently. So since this release has happened, I've been working on essentially, let's go talk about the special pieces of the beta, right? Before I continue, any questions so far? Okay, cool. All right. So there is also kind of a release manager scratch pad, right? So as you're going through the release, you can see there are a few releases that are documented here where a release manager will essentially document their experience, right? And think about things that might need to be fixed and so on and so forth. So here, some of the things that I noticed immediately was one, open the issue. Let's make sure that issue is linked. To the release cut issue template. Needs to be updated. It's currently labeling as area release team. Now that the release managers have all moved out of the release team, this should be area release eng. We should also mention, it mentions the SIG release channel, but we also have the release management channel, which is supposed to be dedicated for exactly these kind of things. So we should mention that in the issue template. So the template also links to a gist of Hannes's test grid shot tool. Since that issue template was created, we've migrated that tool into the Kubernetes release repo. So there's no need to continue pointing to that gist. Our output for test grid shot doesn't show you the sign up page. This is kind of, the user will need to walk through this, not a big deal. Essentially what's happening here is for test grid shot, we're storing it in a bucket from vgy.me, but they have recently had some abuse of their terms of service. So we used to be able to do anonymous uploads. They now require an account to generate a token and then use that for upload. So any release manager will need to sign up for an account. I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to have just one Kubernetes account that we share around, but I'll have to look into it, but it's also not a super huge deal. I'm wondering if this scratch pad should actually become PRs to the repo where we store, that's just a thought. So at least we have it committed to Git history as opposed to some Google Doc that not everyone knows about, right? So then there's also rearranging the references to the branch creation and jobs. You'll see in the branch manager handbook that we mentioned beta 0 in the branch creation, and then we mentioned beta 1 and the other beta releases. But the tasks that we care about are actually here. So it's a little confusing to have them down here. So we should shift this down and push this stuff up, right? So we're essentially at the step where we're starting to look at all of the tasks that are related to the branch cut and to establishing CI. And let's walk through them. These PRs have been, most of them are merged at this point, but let's just talk about what they're doing, right? So let me, and any questions so far? Am I going too fast, too slow? Okay, cool. All right. So you might have noticed I was working on kind of a prototype of testing out our kind of build stage and release flow on the Kubernetes infra, on the K8s infra, like the CNCF sponsored infra, instead of Google infrastructure. So when I do fast forwards to that branch, it will shout at you in Slack. And the reason for that is, so we have this shout right here, just Augustus did a bad thing, and people almost always put this alarm flash on it. So the idea here is that we want to notify people who may be interested in the fact that someone has force pushed a branch or done a manual, done some sort of manual process on a repo, as opposed to allowing the automation to do what the automation is supposed to do, right? So we have ways not around it, but more so that the people who are doing what they are supposed to be doing are not scaring people, essentially, by making it look like they're pushing manually. So for that, we have a whitelist in Slack, right? And that whitelist is stored in its config prow plugins.yaml, right? And essentially, it's just it's YAML bits. I can open this up in my editor instead. Right, and I'll make that bigger. Oh, too big. All right. Okay, so under the Slack heading, you can see configuration for merge warnings, right? And merge warnings, then it's a set of repos, the channel to notify, and who's whitelisted, right? So you can see the K8s CI bot. K8s CI bot does a lot of magic behind the scenes, so we don't want alerting on PR pushes and stuff like that. That would get untenable. But you can see for some of these repos, so enhancements belongs to PM. So if someone pushes manually to that repo, we should get an alert and say PM, and so on and so forth, right? The Kubernetes repo breaks out a little further, right? It allows the CI bot as well as the release robot. The release robot is the token that's used by Anago, which is our release engineering tool, our staging release tool, to authenticate against GitHub and to actually push tags, push releases, right, to GitHub. So you'll see within this, we have a whitelist, a global whitelist for that repo, and then we also have a branch whitelist, right? So within the branch whitelist, you can see that each of the patch release team members are listed in each of these branches, right? And then for the 117 branch, in addition to the patch release managers, there are also the branch managers. So Cheryl, Carlos, and myself, right? And then you can see we also have feature branches. And so for some of the feature branches, we've assigned like branch managers. So they're able to maintain these branches without alerting people that they're doing pushes or fast forwards, what have you. And then that prototype branch that was alerting us before in the release channel, I've added a whitelist so that when I push, you won't know about it. So that's the broad overview of what the Slack whitelist does. Any questions on that one? Okay, cool. All right, so that's the first PR down, right? The second one is, let's do milestone applier since I'm in the same place already, right? So milestone applier, very simple, very similar concept. Well, no, not a similar concept, but the config is in the same place, right here. So Milestone Applier, again, another Proud plugin. What it does is it allows you to apply a milestone after a PR has merged. So this is pretty cool because if we, for organization sake, if someone forgets to apply a milestone or someone doesn't have access to apply a milestone, it'll ensure that a milestone gets applied. So it's easier to search, easier to get history on what happened when, right? So we have a set of, so basically the way this is configured is org, repo, branch, and then the name of the milestone to apply, right? So in Kubernetes, so you can see each of these are set to 1.17 right now. In Kubernetes, we also have the release branches, and each of them are set to the appropriate milestone, right? So you can see in this PR, I'm really just removing the branch that's no longer in support and adding the new one. And then this also has an accompanying PR for post code thaw, and this PR is essentially to update the milestone appliers for 1.18, right? And then you can see I'm just sweeping here and setting each of these to 1.18. So this needs to be rebased now that the other one has merged, but I'll do that once code thaw comes. Any questions on that? Okay, we're grooving. All right, so the next one is a little bit more involved, which is why I saved it. Not super involved, okay, but it's helpful to understand what's happening here. So this is a variance.yaml file, right? And we can take a look at it here. Right. Okay, so what it does is essentially defines, if you were part of the image building call where I did kind of like a tour of wiring up some of the release stuff to use the image builder or the GC builder, then you'll be somewhat familiar with this. Essentially what Variance does is it supplies a set of variants, right? These variants are used as substitutions in a Google Cloud build run, right? So basically, depending on how you have whatever you have configured, you can use these as substitutions. So basically, in this case, you'll see that this one is in images, Kubekins, E2E/variants, right? And what it does is it provides variations on the way the Kubekins E2E image is built, right? So you can see for, we have the Go version is kind of set across the board here, but in terms of like grabbing a Kubernetes release version, it's going to grab stable 1.14 for the 1.14 variant, and it's going to say that this is the 1.14 config, and it's also going to use a certain version of Bazel, right? So to see how that kind of ties in, if we take a look at the Docker file, right? There are certain places in the Docker file, right? So like Kate's release, that looks familiar, right? The Go version, right? So this Go version is like, okay, well, here's the tarball, go install this version, right? So you can see that those are eventually used in the Docker file, but they're also, if we take a look at and I won't do too much on the image builder because there's another recording for that, but what am I looking for? Builder main.go. All right. So the image builder, so here's the cool part. Here's the important part, at least. It might be even better to view this as Kate's release test, right? So we also have these image pushing jobs, right? And the image pushing jobs do exactly what it sounds like. They submit images to be pushed. I don't think all of them are here. This might be, yeah, those might be in I think the Kubikins one is in the test in for a trusted config. What's the best way to show you this?
Just a quick question on the piece that's actually doing the pushing. Where does that like literally run? Is it running in a container? The whole build process? I'm a little bit new, well, very new to the Google product suite as far as building goes.
Yeah, for sure. So the way it works is there are a set of steps defined within a config file, right? And you also see that config file in it's right next to the variance file, right? So cloudbuild.yaml. So within the steps, it basically says, so each step is a different container, right? And they're essentially layered into a workspace, right? So it considers workspace to be the root directory. And what it will do is it'll persist /workspace across each of the steps, right? So what you can do is build a small piece and then have that land in /workspace and then move into another step that continues on that work. So that's kind of what's so here we're building cube test, and then I guess cube test is used in this Docker. So they have a bunch of cloud builders, right? So if you were to go to yeah, perfect, popped up. Okay, just kidding. Right, so there's a Cloud Builders repo that will show you a bunch of these pre-built images that you can use from GCRIO Cloud Builders, right? So Bazel, curl, yada, yada, yada. What's cool about those is they're purpose-built for doing exactly what the name of the image is, right? So Docker will run a Docker command as the entry point. Docker will be the entry point for that one, and so on and so forth, right? So here, I'm saying Docker build, use this tag, use these arguments, and these arguments should look familiar because these are the things that we're pulling in from the variance, right? Now, we also have this images declaration here, right? And what the images declaration will do, so substitution option allow loose basically means if a substitution is missing, normally if that's not set, if substitution is missing, it will bomb the Google Cloud build run, right? Sorry, to answer your question, it runs in multiple containers. That's the answer. So what it'll also do is if you use the Docker image and say that by specifying images, you're saying that I expect an artifact of this release to be GCRIO / whatever your project name is. So whatever project name you run this cloud build as, whatever the git tag is and whatever the config is, right? So if you've ever dug around in test infra and you've seen jobs like this, you've seen tags like this, right? What's happening is that's actually that's not the best tag to view because it might be a manual tag. But if we take a look at something like this, right? What it'll do is it'll compose a tag that is the version, the date, the version of the repo at the time that you cut the release, a build number, G, and then a short git hash, right? So there's also a process that is the image bumper, I think, image bumper, which basically runs a job that goes into the repo. You see how all of these are the same image. There's not a human doing that. There's a machine doing that, checking for latest images, and then submitting a PR to bump each of these, search and replace and bump those. So where was I? All right. So sorry. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate it.
Cool. All right. So within the cloud build, so so within the main.go, right? You can see that we're doing something pretty simple here. We're taking a build directory, GCV config log directory, scratch bucket projects, whether or not we allow a dirty build for the Git repository to be dirty, whether or not we want to upload that source to GCB, and whether or not we want to specify a specific variant. If we don't specify a variant, then all of the variants will try to build, right? So we have this run builds job, and so you can see it's running builds. It's going to try to get the variants. If the variants are equal to 0, then it's going to run a single job, right? It's going to run a single job with whatever you specified as the substitutions and call it a day, right? So you don't need to supply the variants, but if you do, and you don't also supply the flag to choose just one variant, it will run all of the variants, which sometimes you want, right? So you can see that if you look at some of the test infra trusted jobs, are any of the jobs really in config/job/image pushing? You can see that they may be using some image, but they're also doing a CI runner, and then this is all G-Cloud isms, right? I think lower in the file we'll probably have some sort of image building somewhere, maybe, or maybe not. Yeah, a lot of these are G-Cloud, but trust me, there are image building ones in there too. We can look at the cluster API ones as an example, right? So basically it's doing this run, which is just an entry point script, which is in that directory, and all it's doing is running that builder. Running that builder, supplying a log directory, which is supplied by prow when it runs, the prow environment, right? And then if artifacts is not specified, then it will just build with the arguments that you supply it, right? So those arguments that we saw in the Go script before, that's what's happening in the CI job. So basically, it's just running a container to trigger a job in GCB, right? So the actual execution of the job is not happening on the prow cluster outside of the initial instantiation of that job. All of the processing is delegated for those jobs. All the processing is delegated to GCB at that point, right? So that is part of the puzzle, right? So what we're doing here is essentially removing the config for 1.13 and adding the one for 1.17. Now that you understand all of those pieces, not as complicated, right? So this is important when you're using, so like release has some of the variants configured. I started configuring ones to do, so if I take a look here, right. So here's a cloud build, but it's purpose-built for release as opposed to doing image stuff, right? So basically, it's cloning Kubernetes branch and the repo, and then the release repo, doing a make clean on, and you see that these are relative paths. These are all relative to the workspace, right? So basically we're saying we're using the workspace as essentially like your go path, and then moving into each of these directories to do a make clean, then a make, this is a make release in a container, and then a release push build, the push build script, right? So the push build script is used, and then you can see the set of substitutions that we have here, right? And if I look at the variance, right, we can see that different variants are configured. I want no mock, I want to send it to a certain bucket, I want to send it to a certain registry, I also want to also publish this file, right? So when this job runs successfully, you can see stuff like, right, and that's actually the job running right now in the background. So when that job runs successfully, the artifact should land in that bucket, CI, right? And remember that extra publish file that you just saw, katesmaster.txt. If I click into that file, what I'll see is, I'll see this tag, right? Oh, and this tag is basically what a bunch of our automation uses to key into, if you've ever seen like an extract equals latest or something in a test infra config, it's essentially trying to extract the latest.txt, right? Our latest one or latest, see latest 118 just popped up because we recently did the cutover, right? So once we've moved into that 117 branch, it starts considering master as 118. So it's also starting to tag latest 118, right? So that is consistent with that Kate's master tag, right? The reason that's super important is if we, if I do a quick search for wrong repo, if I do a quick search for extract equals, right? And we can see all of these extracts, right? So like our infra relies heavily on this piece existing, right? And if we click into even one of these jobs, we can see that it's running a scenario, E2E scenario, right? This E2E scenario, is it interesting? You can take a look at it at your leisure. But essentially we have a set of scenarios in test infra. The scenarios are basically packaged into Bootstrap. And if you've ever heard of Bootstrap, you know that Bootstrap has been deprecated for a long time. Bootstrap will even tell you while it's running that it is deprecated somewhere. But essentially Bootstrap is what we are using to build, you can see Bootstrap, what we're using to build the Kubekins E2E test, the Kubekins E2E image. And then that Kubekins E2E image is used all over the place within test infra, right? So a lot of your jobs, if you're running jobs on Prow, are dependent on those two things, right? But the underlying image is a thing that's supposed to be deprecated, right? So what I like about moving the build process, so there is a prototype build job, right? So this CI Kate's prototype build is running on the test infra trusted cluster, right? And that's what I just showed you. This variance here, right? It's running the CI version, the build CI version of it, right? So variance build CI, don't upload any of the source, and point at GCB build as your config directory, right? So you can see that this is located in GCB build cloud.yaml, right? So that's where it's going to go look for its artifacts or its configs, right, for submitting. And what this will eventually give us is, you can see it's checking out the release repo, and it's doing a path alias of Kate's release, kates.io/release. This job encapsulates the same stuff that we're doing in the standard job, Kubernetes CI Kubernetes build, right? You can see CI Kubernetes build is using that scenario, right? And the Kubernetes build scenario, and right. And if you scroll to the bottom of Kubernetes build, I know I'm starting to go fast on some of this stuff, but you've got that make clean, make quick release, or make release, and then finally check the arguments and do run the push build script, right? You can see that the push build script by default will be release pushbuild.sh. And then you can see that if we look at the steps for that cloud build, we've got the clone, make clean, make release, and then push build, right? So we've replicated the steps that were happening in a deprecated image on something that is essentially infrastructure that we only sort of have to manage, right? So this is a net win for us. And this is also running in the Kubernetes infrastructure, the Kates infra, and not the Google infrastructure, right? So I'm essentially working on prototyping a bunch of jobs for the build stage release process to cut over all of those processes to Kate's infra. Right? So it's going well. If you want to follow along on that work, it is here. Right. And this is some of my best guess of some of the things that need to be done and what's in progress already. So those on the chat can check it out. And all right, so let's jump back into that branch management handbook. Does anyone have questions before I continue? I don't know where I put it now. All right, we're just gonna pull it back up. Okay, so we said we were doing, we did the whitelist, we started on this stuff, the pre-submit jobs, right? So we've updated the variance.yaml. We have, then we sort of skipped ahead and did the dashboards because the dashboards are dependent on the branch being cut. We've run this experiment prepare release branch Bazel command, which generates new jobs for the release, and then also updated some of these dashboards. So it tells you now, let's go and make sure that we resolve any configuration errors, and we have some known errors that we have to worry about. Maybe they're fixed. So let's dive in. Let's see what happens. Okay, well that failed. That's cool. Right, so I did some of that work already. So you can see a few different commits. We're dropping. So there was an error from one of the jobs was using fork per release, which basically that's the annotation that the release job preparer will key into when deciding whether or not to create a job within the release branch jobs directory, right? So let me show you that. Let me close a few of these. Okay, so lots of stuff open. All right, so within test infra, there is what do I want to show you? Okay. So there are a bunch of configs we've been bouncing around testing for a little bit. But what I want to show you is, so Kubernetes builds, right? So there are a few different jobs within config, jobs, Kubernetes, sig release, right? So there's CIP, which is a container image promoter, and then there's these release branch jobs, right? So you can see 114, and 114 has a set of jobs. If a job is tagged as, let's do, if we do CI conformance hyphen, right? We'll get a few different places, right? And one of them will be latest. If a job has an annotation fork per release true, that means that it'll be targeted to be forked when you run the config forker, right? Now, there are a few essentially replacements that it'll do. It'll try to figure out if you give it extract, it will extract CI latest. It will say basically transform extract CI latest from CI latest to whatever the latest is on that branch that I've given you, or the next latest branch, right? So if I'm cutting for 117 when I run the config forker, this will essentially transpose a job that is CI Kubernetes GCE conformance latest dash 117, and then it'll also fill in 117 here. So let's see if it actually did that, right? So I'd run the config fork, and you can see again, it's CI Kubernetes GCE conformance, latest 117, and then see that fork per release, I forgot the annotation name. It's fork per release replacements, right? So it was CI latest here, and now it's CI latest dash 117. So it did exactly what it was supposed to, right? And then you can also see that the image used is Kubekins, but it's Kubekins dash 117, right? And Kubekins dash 117 is coming from, you guessed it, that variance that we merged in, right? Using the config from here, right? So we're making sure that we generate an image that is used, is purpose built for that branch with a certain configuration, and then we make sure that the components within that image are what they're supposed to be, right? So that's why I went into the spiel about the variance earlier, because it's important for all of these tests. If you're interested in seeing that code, it is under test infra experiment config forker. And config forker is essentially, I won't drill into it too much, but I thought it was a Python script, but maybe it's not a Python script. Or maybe I'm thinking of the prepare, prepare release branch. Right, so we'll run this experiment, and prepare release branch will do prepare release.py, which is there, right? So you can see it's doing a few things. It's going to figure out what the current version is. It's going to kill the dead branch. It's going to try to rotate some of the old files. It's going to try to fork the new file and then update the test config, right? Basically what the job configs will run against to verify that they're accurate, and then try to regenerate some of the files, right? So that happened in this commit, right? And then afterwards, I ran into some errors because the 117 dashboards did not exist. So then I create the 117 dashboards and remove the 113 dashboards. Those dashboards are sig release / test grids, right? So that is located in config test grid Kubernetes sig release / config.yaml, right? And basically, we were defining a set of dashboard groups, dashboard names, right? So you can see all of ours here, master blocking and forming, when, x dot y, all blocking and informing, the image pushes, miscellaneous, publishing bot, release notes, pre-submits, the prototype, master blocking, and then I recently created a new dashboard called job config errors, or rather it exists in this commit, but it doesn't exist in real life yet. If you're curious about the test grid boards, and specifically the SIG release ones, you can see them here. For those on the call, I'm posting in the chat. There you go. But you can see each of those tabs that are configured pop up here. And then you can, this is essentially what the release team is using quite frequently, especially CI signal, to determine the health of certain areas of the project. So we're going to mosey on ahead. And I think that I would like to see this run against CI so we can catch some things that I might not be doing correctly or might have missed. So push a. Right, and okay. Mm, 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 mm. So I expect one or two things to fail here, and this will take a little time to run. So I scheduled this for an hour, but I have more time if people are happy to hang out while we go through some of this stuff. I want to see if there are any questions. I know I've been running through things.
No, and I'm sure it will take me another one.
Huh?
I said no questions now, but I'm sure it will take me another one.
All right, so I'm going to assign Catherine because she's seen some of this stuff already.
And I gotta go, so thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, for sure. And outside of this, I guess I should maybe we can just we can wrap it up since we are at the top of the hour. But let's go check out the handbook one more time. So you can see afterwards, after we've submitted this PR, we'll do the milestone appliers. That is actually already merged. We'll make sure that the Kubernetes versions.md is up to date, right? So Kubernetes versions.md is actually all of those variants and the version marker files that I was talking about. This document explains that a little bit. So here you go. And yeah. Yeah, so so a lot of the CI jobs will use like CI, Kate's beta, so on and so forth. So essentially, we just try to keep some of these up to date. The ones that are dev and beta, and latest, those are I get, yeah, dev, beta, and the stables actually are all of the CI versions, right? There are also like variants of those like dash Bazel and dash Bazel remote build execution.txt and stuff like that. They just let you know that there is a certain variant of the build that was run in a specific way. I ran it in Bazel, I ran it, you know, in Bazel using remote build execution, or, right, we also have the uh, the release versions, right? So the release versions are the latest and stable ones. So latest.txt or stable.txt are either one of those -x.y will give you the latest tag or the stable tag for one of the releases that's in support, depending on what you choose, right? So okay, so the merge automation, that doesn't come till later. Yeah, okay, so I think at this point, once we land that PR, there are some announcement things that are, it's kind of, there's nothing super exciting about the announcements outside of getting people hyped that a new version of Kubernetes is out, right? You can see um, within the cloud build run, once the run is successful, you will have, again, it'll give you some instructions. So I don't want to do the announcement until I know that the CI jobs are set, right? Just for everyone's sanity, right? But it will tell you how to release notify, no mock, and then this version number. And what it'll do is it'll spit out a template within. I always have trouble finding this, so I should probably document it this time around. But I believe it'll spit out a template in one of these buckets. Let's GCP maybe, archive, and then if I was to just choose an arbitrary release just to show you, or not. Yeah, just choosing something. Well, let's go with beta 0, right? But you can see these are like, this is exactly where we stage our artifacts. It is not where I think it is. I think it's in Kubernetes release. So I need to go look for that. We can do a separate thing and a GS util shell GS : Kubernetes release. Release. That's going to be a lot of stuff. Okay, so like I said, the announcement stuff is not super exciting, outside of the fact that it's like tricky to find if you forget exactly what bucket it's living in. Okay, all right, so release, and then the release version. All right, so release v1.17-beta.0. Okay. Probably need that .0 in there. Okay. So this is not the bucket. This is not the bucket that the announcement's in. I will find the announcement later, and you will see an announcement on Kubernetes announce and Kubernetes dev once the CI jobs are set up. Are there any questions before we go?
No questions, but thanks again for sharing.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. I'm enjoying these. I'm enjoying these sessions. I think we'll do them more frequently. All right, everyone, take it easy. This will be up on the SIG release playlist by the end of the week. Take it easy.